Hi, followers of Bernardo Lapallo. This is Erica, his granddaughter, and it is, God, what day is it already? It is already the 22nd of September. And I don't come up on here in a spontaneous fashion very often, but I felt moved to do that today. The caption of this live video is, "Everything God made is good, but you have to know how to use it." And that's something that my grandfather, something Bernardo would say often. And the reason why I'm bringing this up today is that I have gotten some messages for people saying things like, "I know Bernardo, ate black beans, but I'm having a hard time digesting them." And somehow or another equating this inability to digest black beans with failure. So it's not a failure. My grandfather always said that what he was telling people was what worked for him. He was always very clear about that. And he also said that everybody's chemical makeup, right? Everyone's chemistry is different. So what does that mean? That means there's going to be some things that are not going to agree with you. So don't eat them. It's very simple. There is no attempt on my part or my grandfather's part to, try and squeeze you or shoehorn you into, doing things or eating exactly. I think the takeaway here is that Bernardo knew how to manage stress. He took time to relax every day. He exercised every day. He slept soundly every night. And he ate a diet rich in fruits and vegetables. That is the takeaway. He didn't eat any red meat. He explained in his book why he didn't eat any red meat. He didn't eat any chicken. He didn't eat any eggs. He didn't, his jam was fish. But just to try and make this more personal, I don't eat fish. And I'm his granddaughter. I've chosen another way in which to get, my omega-3 fatty acids and my proteins. I have been a vegetarian since I was 18 years old. A lot of that, I'm pretty sure, was influenced by him because I grew up eating a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables because of his influence. But do I eat fish? No, I don't eat fish. Does that make me unhealthy? No, it doesn't make me unhealthy. So that's what works for me. That's my personal choice. And actually, when I used to go to visit my grandpa, when he was making dinner, he'd always say to me, "You're not going to have any fish? You're not going to have any fish?" And I'd be like, "No, Grandpa, I'm not going to have any fish." So he had his list, of preferred foods. And he was very, very stubborn. It worked for him. There was nothing you could say or nothing you could do to get him off that. It worked for him. He was moderate in the portions that he ate. He never overate. But, if you're looking for, a scientific, or I should say, like precise measurements of how much olive oil he used every day, I can't give that to you, You have to understand, my grandfather for me was not a science project. He was my grandfather and he lived his life. He had his own apartment, his own home, his own life, his own careers, many careers, and he did that. I was his granddaughter. Yes, we were very close. I was very interested in him. I was very interested in what he did, and I enjoyed very much interacting with him. But does that mean that I was in his kitchen, every evening, like going, "Wait, Grandpa, how much olive oil are you using there? And let me get the measuring thing." What's my point? My point is that you have to have a basic understanding of cooking. I mean, you have to exercise some common sense. But for example, maybe one person, someone sent me a message and they said, I just read about this old lady who drinks, a half a cup or a cup of olive oil, every morning when she gets up. But then I read about another person who, only uses this many tablespoons of olive oil every day. And then I read about another person who does this. What's the right answer? The right answer is what works for you. That's the right answer because you are unique. This page is not about everyone becoming like a cookie cutter person. So, you have to think about your own history, about your own physical history, about your family history, and then you have to make adjustments according to that. And again, some things may agree with you and some things may not agree with you, and that's okay because everything God made is good. It all, what it's important is that you understand how to use it or how not to use it. Like, so for example, still on the topic of olive oil, okay? So, by the way, I have made some demo videos over on the Age Less Live More YouTube channel, which is Grandpa's dedicated YouTube channel. You can find demos of him doing his barley soup and green salad and fruit salad. But I've also done different demos because, for example, so many people were asking about how to make his garlic paste. So I came up with a way that was, I thought, an easy way to do that without having to like twist the brain around about, exact measurements and all this. Just like a kind of a quick, practical way to do it, because a lot of cooking is also learning, the most efficient way to do things. Time, testing, taste, and above all, economy. That's what Bernardo used to say. So, if you want to, he would put a healthy teaspoon, maybe even closer to a tablespoon of garlic paste in his superfood smoothie every morning, right? That worked for him. You may not be able to use that much. Maybe you won't be able to use any at all, but that's what he did. Now, do we want to get into an analysis and break it down as to exactly how much olive oil is, in proportion to the garlic and that? I mean, if you really want to, you can, but you can also drive yourself crazy doing things like that. So this is, he was living his life and it was a lifestyle. That's my point here. Take the best and leave the rest. Take what works for you. If something doesn't work for you, leave it behind. It's really very simple. It's not complicated. I think in today's world, we overthink a lot of things. Actually, we probably overthink the things that we don't need to overthink, and maybe the things that we need to think a little bit about more, we don't think enough about. Like, do you have a life insurance policy? Do you have your family covered in case of an emergency? Do you have enough savings? Things like that. Those are things that need to be worried about. Have you taken care of your funeral arrangements? Have you made out your will? Have you organized all that so as not to leave a burden on your loved ones when you pass away? Those types of things, are important. How are you planning your day? How are you planning your day to be able to make health your first priority? That's important. But, again, this thing with the olive oil came up. And, it's apparently controversial. There was no controversy in Bernardo's mind about anything he did because he was obedient to his father, my great-grandfather, who was a medical doctor. Of course, the world was a much different place then. Things were cleaner. Things were not as polluted as they are now. So, this other point of, quote, controversy, some people don't think that you should fry with olive oil. Okay, so I'd like to make a distinction here. My grandfather didn't fry anything in olive oil. He did a very light saute of his green vegetables and that. And so what does that mean? That means that the flame is turned down to a low temperature, low to medium temperature. And he would just do that enough so they would become tender, and that was it, you know. Now, if you don't like that idea and you would prefer to use something else, go ahead and do that. But he, you know, you could not bring an argument to him and say, well, Grandpa, I heard that, you know, you can't heat olive oil and you can't do this and you can't do that with olive oil. He said, well, I've been doing this for over 100 years. You're going to tell me that I can't do this? You're not going to change anything about what I'm doing, and you're not going to change anything about my diet. This works for me, and that's what I'm going to do. You do what you want to do, but this is what I'm doing. He was extremely stubborn. He was extremely fixed in his principles, and he was zero fad. Zero. No fad. People would bring him stuff all the time. They'd bring him like, oh, try these, you know, try these pills and try this formula and try this, you know, newfangled whatever. And he was very polite. He would accept the thing. He would say thank you, and it would go in a bag in his closet, which I discovered when I was staying with him the last month of his life, because I was just, you know, sort of trying to understand where things were, and I was moving in, right, and, you know, where can I put my stuff, and trying to organize a little bit. And I remember I found, I mean, it was like a big trash bag full of all these pills and, you know, this and that people would bring him. And I was like, Grandpa, what is this? What is this? And he said, people bring me those things. They try and get me to buy these different things. You know, I guess they figure if I do it and endorse it, then, you know, it will help their sales. I just say thank you, and I put it here. And I'm like, well, why do you keep it? You know? And he said, well, sometimes people come over here for the superfood and they ask me, do I have a pill for this or that? You know? And I say, well, I have something. I can't guarantee it's going to work, but if you want it, you can have it. So what does that tell you? You know, tried and true things. So that's all I kind of really wanted to say today. You know, I wanted to say that you have to live your life. You have to find out what works for you. That's really important. And you also have to understand that no one knows your body as well as you know your body, because you're living in it every day. If something feels off to you, you notice it right away, right? You may go to the doctor will say, well, we can't find anything, but, you know, maybe you're feeling something. Does that invalidate what you're feeling? No, you know, you have to think, you know, you have to think, and you have to spend some time thinking, and you have to examine what it is you're doing. Did you change something in your routine? Did you trip over something? You know, what's going on? Do you need a medical checkup? You know, what's happening? Have you changed something? Is something thrown you off in your routine? You know, we're alive. So as long as we're alive and as long as we have this body, we have to be aware, and we have to make adjustments sometimes, you know, according to that. So let me see. Thank you, Frank. Hey, Frank, nice to see you here. And Sandy and Lucy Truss. Let me see. Can I see who else is watching here? John Pace, hello. Glenn Watts, hello. Robbie Russo, hello. Ross Jerami, Elba Montenegro, G. Alexander, Derek Bliss, and David Harvey. Thank you so much. So this is just something that, you know, I've been thinking about this for a while, and it's been kind of bothering me because, you know, there's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law, and they're not exactly the same thing, right? The last thing I'm going to say about extra virgin olive oil that my grandfather anointed his body with every day, that he used as a light pomade instead of hair gel, which is why he had hair, because that stuff, all those gels are full of alcohol and chemicals, and they will break your hair up. and that he used olive oil in the light sautés that he did for his green vegetables. Yes, there was olive oil in the garlic paste that he used in his smoothies. And of course, if he had a salad, he would use olive oil for that. You know, if he was baking his salmon or baking his fish, you want to put a little oil on the bottom of the pan so it doesn't stick, or you want to do that if you're frying it. But we have some fans on this page that live in India, for example. Now, India is not a land that is renowned for olive oil. You know, olive oil is originally coming from the Mediterranean, from Greece. And in certain parts of this country, like California and Arizona, for example, it's adapted well. People have made it work, and you can get olive oil from, reputable, companies that don't use pesticides and so forth and keep it real, right? But there's olive oil in India, so what's a person to do? Research. See, what is it in your tradition? What is it that people were using for millennia to use in their food and to maybe put on their body and these different things? Now, one thing that comes to mind is ghee. Ghee is clarified butter. And before this animal slaughter, this cow slaughter that was going on in India, cows were protected. There was no question of killing a cow. Why? Because the cow, everything about the cow is pure. The urine is pure. The urine is medicinal. The dung is pure. The dung is medicinal and can be used for fertilizer. It can be made into patties to cook food with, which actually imparts a better flavor. It can be used to heat the floor. It cools in summer. It heats in winter. It can be used on thatched roofs. If you burn the cow dung patties, once they're dry, you can use the ash. It's a natural pesticide. You can use that in grains. You can use it as a tooth powder. What to speak of the cow giving milk and butter and all these different things that are wholesome, provided you're not torturing the cow and you're not killing the cow at the end of her or his lifetime. So I want to put this in context for you. So this is traditional Vedic India. So what were they using? They were using ghee. They were using clarified butter, right? They would use that to, deep fry if they were making savory items, very sumptuous items, or they would use that, like lightly in cooking if they were making a vegetable dish, for example, and so on and so forth. And a cow that is growing up in this kind of atmosphere, that is getting the proper care, the proper love, that is being treated properly, that is being cleaned properly, that is being taken out to pasture on a regular basis and is actually eating all the nice different kinds of suitable grasses, and is not being fed fish or other cow flesh or such nonsense like that. The quality of the milk that you get from a cow that is actually happy, it's fragrant and it's full and rich in omega-3 fatty acids and all of that. So what's my point here? My point is not to try and get you to go out and drink milk. That's not my point. My point is that everything God made is good, but you have to know how to use it. So on every parcel of land on this earth, God has put the appropriate herbs. He has put the appropriate trees, flowers, animals, so on and so forth, in order to allow the human being to live a peaceful, healthy, and abundant life, just from taking, and treating properly what has been given. Another example, Ireland. So I have a friend who's Irish, and we were talking one day about health things, and he brought up, respiratory issues. We were talking about how people back in the day used to die of consumption, right? So consumption, tuberculosis, these were all respiratory issues that people would have. in these climates that tended to be very damp. So, remembering my grandfather, I said to him, well, what was the traditional method in Ireland for treating such a thing? Surely there must have been something, on God's green earth that people could use. And he said, oh, people would use moss. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah, people would use this moss and they would make a tea out of it and drink that. And the tea had the effect of, shoring up the respiratory system. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Just see, or China, for example. There is a saying in China that if a man has sage in his garden, he will live long and live to be wise. Something like, live a long time and live to be wise. Sage. Okay, today most people, use sage to burn, right? But sage actually makes a fantastic tea because sage also is very salutary for the respiratory system and can help, dry up mucus or anything like that, those coughs, those stubborn coughs, and so on and so forth. So just see, all the way in China, God put something on the earth there that could help the people that are there, live a long and healthy life. So I hope you see and understand, what I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to convey to you, that you are an individual, that yes, it is certainly beneficial to drink a lot of clean water and to eat a diet, rich in fruits and vegetables. But does that mean that every fruit's going to agree with you? No. Some people are allergic to strawberries. Some people are allergic to pineapple. People have different allergic reactions. Does that mean you should persist in eating that thing? Of course not. Find something that works for you. The other point here too is that in America, at least, we have access to different kinds of fruits and vegetables that people didn't have access to 100 years ago, right? But now we're flying in, pineapples and flying in, all kinds of exotic fruits and vegetables, for example. It was not like this before. There was what grew locally and what was available locally, and that's what you ate, So I think it's important to take that into consideration when you're trying to craft your diet. That, again, there are things that may not agree with you because they are coming from, a different part of the world, right? It might not be there for you. It might not. So that's important to understand, like, for example, for me, cucumbers. I can eat cucumbers. I don't have a problem with cucumbers, but I know a lot of ladies, for example, they like putting cucumbers on their eyes or using cucumber masks. Well, if I do that, I break out. Me and cucumbers, in terms of the skin, we don't get along, and that's just the way it is. So I don't do it. Okay. All right. Well, I think that I've gone on enough here in what I have to say. Jennifer McDonald, Shanta L. Turner, Amos Naderi, Gina Thomas, Jamie Zolan. Who else is here? Harhan L., Christine Horton. I really appreciate you being here. I hope that I think most of you understand what I'm saying. Sometimes people will say, "Well, how ripe should the banana be?" Well, I mean, as ripe as you can take it. I like my bananas ripe, but I don't like them overly ripe. But but Bernardo, he used to eat bananas even if they had spots on them. If I were putting it in a smoothie, okay. But, for me, I like it ripe, but, I like it to be ripe. I don't like it to be overly ripe, So everyone is an individual and everyone has their individual preferences. It's the underlying principles, right? Keeping your blood going, your circulation going, keeping a positive attitude, going to the bathroom, passing stool at least 3 times a day, if you're eating 3 times a day, all those different things are important. That's the basis of it, because you want to keep things growing, you want to keep things growing, you want things to be going out. But is it the end of the world if you can't eat black beans? No, it's not. So you all have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. And I will see you the next time. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Bye-bye.